October 30th, 1501. The Apostolic Palace, heart of Christendom, smells of wax, spilled wine, and something illicit. 50 candles on the floor throw distorted shadows across the bare shoulders and glistening skin of celebrated courtesans. Polished marble floors, usually for priests, glint under a carpet of chestnuts that roll and scatter like loose coins. The women, some still in silk slippers, are on their hands and knees, scrambling between the flames. Chasing them are the princes of the church, their scarlet robes a blur of holy color against naked flesh. Enthroned on a velvet pillow, watching it all with a keen eye, is Pope Alexander VI. He tallies scores, a bookie at a forbidden game, his presence a silent endorsement of the debauchery. Somewhere in the gilded chaos, a lute plucks a forgotten, sensual tune. Tonight, the Vatican isn't holy ground. It's a backstage pass to hell itself. Rodrigo Borgia was never meant to be pious. He was engineered for power. Born in 1431, his clan treated the church less like a spiritual calling and more like a family-owned corporation. His path was set early. As a boy, his uncle, Pope Calixtus III, hauled him to Rome. His uncle didn't give him a prayer book. He gave him a shopping list: votes, land, allies, and benefices. These lucrative church appointments functioned as personal cash machines. By 25, Rodrigo was a cardinal, commanded an army, and kept a ledger listing his mistresses. Chief among them was Vanozza de Catane, who bore him 4 children he openly acknowledged: Giovanni, Cesare, Lucrezia, and Gioffre. When Calixtus died, Rodrigo didn't mourn. He simply upgraded the hustle. He was a master of Renaissance politics. The 1492 papal conclave, held in the Sistine Chapel, was his masterpiece of corruption. He didn't win with prayer. He won with bribes. One cardinal was promised a palace and the office of vice-chancellor. Another was bought with a bishopric worth 10,000 ducats a year. An epigram in Rome said it all. Alexander sells the keys, the altar, Christ himself. He has a right to, for he bought them. By August of 1492, the ledger had a new, triumphant header: Alexander VI, Pontifex Maximus. 3 days after his election, Alexander threw a party so extravagant, Rome still talks about it. It wasn't just a celebration, it was a statement. He wanted the world to know a Borgia now sat on the throne of Saint Peter. Coins, actual silver pieces bearing his profile, rained down from the battlements of Castel Sant'Angelo. Prostitutes, many already on the Borgia payroll, were given new velvet gowns and paraded through the streets. It was a symbol of the Pope's generosity. The Tiber itself seemed to shimmer with reflected gold. But what the chronicles left out was that half the sparkle came from melted down sacred chalices and pawned church treasures. All of it was cashed in to cover the astronomical bill. Rome got the memo loud and clear. This new pope was ambitious, he was powerful, and he was open for business. Under Alexander, the papacy stopped looking like a religious institution. It operated like a crime family with better art. His children were not just family, they were his chief lieutenants in a grand scheme to establish a Borgia dynasty. Cesare, the Pope's favorite son, was a brilliant and ruthless strategist. He famously swapped his cardinal's hat for a suit of steel. With his father's blessing and church money, he launched brutal military campaigns to forge his own kingdom in Italy's Romagna region. Then there was Lucrezia, Alexander's daughter. She was the family's most valuable diplomatic chip, a beautiful pawn in their game of power. She was married off 3 separate times to forge strategic alliances. Her first marriage to Giovanni Sforza secured an alliance with Milan. Her second, to Alfonso of Aragon, tied the Borgias to the Kingdom of Naples. Her third, to the Duke of Ferrara, gave the family a permanent, noble foothold in Italy. The dowries for these weddings were often paid for with money from the sale of indulgences. As the family's power grew, so did the dark whispers that surrounded them. Rumors of incest, fratricide, and poisoned rivals. Witnesses to Borgia crimes had a tendency to vanish. The rumors did not. In the summer of 1497, the dark whispers circling the Borgia family turned into a roar. The Pope's eldest son, Juan, the dashing Duke of Gandia, was by all accounts universally hated. One June night, after a dinner at his mother's villa, he disappeared. Days later, his body was pulled from the Tiber River. He had been stabbed 9 times and his throat was cut. Yet his purse, with 30 gold ducats, was untouched. This wasn't a robbery. It was an execution. Pope Alexander was shattered by the death of his favorite son. He launched a massive citywide manhunt. But then, just as suddenly as it began, the investigation was quietly called off. Envoys whispered the truth in coded letters. The trail had led too close to home. The prime suspect was none other than Juan's own brother, Cesare. The two had been bitter rivals. They clashed over military command, their father's favor, and perhaps even the affection of their sister, Lucrezia. The message was as old as the Sicilian hills. Family first, holy water second. 4 years later, on Halloween 1501, Cesare Borgia threw a private party in his apartments within the Apostolic Palace. The guest list was exclusive. A handful of cardinals, powerful bankers, and of course, his father, Pope Alexander VI. The entertainment was meticulously planned. A feast, followed by 50 of Rome's most esteemed courtesans. And then came the main event. According to Johann Burchard's diary, what happened next was simple and simply shocking. The candelabras were taken from the tables and placed on the floor. Chestnuts were scattered among them. The 50 courtesans were then instructed to strip naked and crawl on their hands and knees to pick up the chestnuts. All while the Pope, his son Cesare, and his daughter Lucrezia looked on. After this, Burchard recorded that prizes were offered to the men who could perform the act most often with the courtesans. Burchard wrote it all down in his dry, precise Latin, without metaphor or judgment. He wasn't writing a sensational exposé. He was just keeping a log, the ledger of a man who never exaggerated. Some scholars argue the story is too outrageous to be true, an interpolation added later to slander the Borgias. But 500 years have produced 0 documents to contradict Burchard's account. Occam's razor suggests that if it looks, sounds, and quacks like a papal orgy, it probably was one. Alexander's final gambit was his most ambitious, marrying Lucrezia into the powerful Este family of Ferrara. This move was designed to cement a Borgia dynasty that would rule for generations. But his time was running out. On a hot August evening in 1503, he and Cesare shared wine at a dinner party in a cardinal's vineyard. A few days later, Both father and son were consumed by a violent fever. Cesare, younger and stronger, survived, though his face was left scarred and his body ravaged. Alexander was not so lucky. The rumor mills screamed poison, that they had accidentally drunk a vintage intended for their host. A secret autopsy, however, whispered a more mundane culprit. Malaria, rampant in the summer swamps around the city. Either way, the Borgia spell was broken overnight. With the Pope dead, the fear he had inspired evaporated. Romans looted the papal wine cellars, while the family's enemies began plotting their return. Alexander's bloated corpse, decomposing in the August heat, became a horrifying public spectacle. One witness called it the ugliest, most monstrous and horrible dead body that was ever seen, without any form or likeness of humanity. It was so swollen that undertakers had to pummel it with their fists to hammer it into an undersized coffin. There were no grand hymns, no clouds of incense, just the dull thud of nails and the collective hiss of public disgust. Throughout his reign, Alexander VI never repented, never slowed down, and never bothered with the pretense of piety. He was a force of nature, a man who bent the holy see to his will. The story of the Banquet of Chestnuts still clings to his name like the scent of candle smoke. It distills every fear about power run amok. Sacred halls turned into a casino, salvation traded for spectacle. Was he history's most perverted pope? Perhaps. But he was one of the first to grasp a very modern concept. That spectacle can buy loyalty, fear, and a twisted form of immortality far faster than theology ever could. Parts of his reign and the full truth of his deeds likely remain locked away in the Vatican archives. Somewhere, perhaps, another of Burchard's diaries is gathering dust. Until then, the story stands as a chilling monument. A pope, a palace, and a party that dragged the papacy to its lowest depths.